The shocking true story of Ron Williamson and Dennis Fritz from Netflix's The Innocent Man.
Oh my goodness, he throwed my little girl around that apartment like that, I bet you. And I just sat there.
The crime that shook Ada. It was the kind of crime that shattered the sense of safety in the quiet town of Ada, Oklahoma. A crime so brutal, so disturbing, that it sent shockwaves through the community and left people demanding justice. A young woman, full of life and promise, was taken in the most violent way imaginable. The investigation that followed would change lives, sending 2 men to prison and 1 to row. But what if the people locked away for the crime weren't guilty? What if the real perpetrator had been hiding in plain sight all along? On December 8, 1982, 21-year-old Debbie Sue Carter, a beloved waitress at the Coach Light Club, was found brutally injured and unalived in her own apartment. It was a crime scene unlike anything local authorities had ever seen. Words were scrawled across her body in ketchup, a chilling message from a perpetrator who had vanished into the night. The town was in shock. The police were under immense pressure to find the culprit, and they needed suspects, and they needed them fast. What followed was a desperate attempt to solve the case, one that would later prove to be one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in American history. The wrong men. The need for quick justice led authorities to 2 men, Ron Williamson and Dennis Fritz. Their lives were about to change forever, but not because they were guilty. Ron Williamson had been Ada's golden boy. A local baseball star, he once dreamed of making it to the big leagues. But life had other plans. After injuries and struggles with mental illness, his dreams of stardom faded, and he returned to Ada, becoming a familiar face around town. But to the police, he was an easy target. He was troubled, loud, unpredictable.
Ron was very suspicious, had a bad reputation, and at that time in his life, the only person Ron was hanging around with was Dennis Fritz.
Then there was Dennis Fritz, a single father and a school teacher. He had no history of aggression, no connection to the crime. His only mistake being Ron Williamson's friend. That was enough to put him in the crosshairs of law enforcement. The police, desperate for a resolution, built a case against them. But there was a problem. There was no physical evidence linking them to the homicide. A case built on lies. With no DNA, no fingerprints, and no real connection between the men and the crime, how did the prosecution secure a conviction? They relied on 2 things: a supposed confession from Ron Williamson, one he made in a dream, and the testimony of a jailhouse informant, a man with a history of lying in exchange for lighter sentences. It was a case built on desperation, not facts. But in a town hungry for justice, it worked. Dennis Fritz was sentenced to life in prison. But what about Ron Williamson? Well, he was sent to row. Life on row. For over a decade, Ron Williamson lived in a 6-by-9-foot cell, awaiting execution for a crime he didn't commit. The isolation, the fear, the mental toll, it was unimaginable. He came within 5 days of being executed before receiving a last-minute stay. The system had failed him in every way possible. It would have cost him his life. Then something changed. In the 1990s, DNA evidence was becoming more reliable, and the Innocence Project, a non-profit dedicated to overturning wrongful convictions, took on his case. The truth comes out. The evidence was re-examined. The results? Neither Ron Williamson nor Dennis Fritz had anything to do with Debbie Carter's homicide. So who was the real perpetrator? In a shocking turn of events, it was someone who had been there all along. Glenn Gore, the very man who had testified against them in court. Gore had a history of aggression against women. He had been at the Coach Light Club the night of Debbie's homicide. And now, thanks to DNA testing, his involvement was undeniable. On April 15, 1999, after spending 12 years behind bars for a crime they didn't commit, Ron Williamson and Dennis Fritz were finally exonerated. But the damage had already been done. Ron Williamson's mental health had deteriorated beyond repair. The years of wrongful imprisonment, the trauma of row, it was too much. Just 5 years after his release, in 2004, he passed away at the age of 51. Dennis Fritz, on the other hand, took a different path. He wrote a book about his ordeal, Journey Toward Justice, shedding light on the flaws of the justice system. Their story gained widespread attention after being featured in John Grisham's 2006 book, The Innocent Man, which was later adapted into a Netflix documentary. A broken system. So how did this happen? How did 2 innocent men lose more than a decade of their lives while the real perpetrator walked free? The answer lies in a broken system, one that prioritizes convictions over truth. Prosecutors like Bill Peterson, lead investigator Dennis Smith, and OSBI agent Gary Rogers built their careers on cases like this. Even after DNA evidence cleared Ron and Dennis, many of them refused to admit their mistakes. Some still defend their decisions to this day, but this isn't just one isolated case. This story is more than just a tragic miscarriage of justice. It's a warning. Studies estimate that anywhere from 2.3% to 5% of prisoners in the U.S. may be innocent. That means as many as 120,000 people could be locked away for crimes they didn't commit. It happened to Ron Williamson and Dennis Fritz. It could happen to anyone. So what do you think? Should the people responsible for these wrongful convictions be held accountable? Should there be consequences for those who send innocent people to prison? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into true crime cases like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and stay skeptical.